It's been dubbed one of, if not the most unique multi-purpose stadiums in existence. A multi-purpose stadium that is a dome. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome that originally did open in 1982 and made it to 2013. It was demolished in 2014 to make way for the Minnesota Vikings' new super stadium, US Bank Stadium. Obviously, at that point, you had the Minnesota Twins playing at Target Field. But let's look back in the early 1970s. The Vikings were unhappy with metropolitan stadiums, relatively small capacity for football, and they thought the Twins would also benefit from a climate-controlled indoor facility, and that introduces us to the Metrodome that has that old retro tent-like roof that I'm sure a lot of people, at this point, I think most casual people remember the Metrodome for the roof collapsing back in like 2011, and the Vikings had to end up playing a few games at the Minnesota Gophers Stadium. That's what it's known for. It is sad. And here's something that I thought was pretty funny. When they replaced the roof after it had collapsed due to the snow, that you can see, I mean, they're really getting good with this tent roof technology. They do have like a little translucent like window square in the center of it. It's the same thing the Carrier Dome has done, I believe. And it did kind of improve the natural, well, I guess it definitely improved the natural lighting of the stadium, especially when viewing it on TV. And one of the things that teams and franchises realized, the more natural light, the better. It looks better when you go to games, you know, when you're watching on television. So you can see when they installed the new one, like in 2011, the square, it does have like a more of a reflective, you know, translucent type look to it that allows for more natural light. That was like their big upgrade when they put the new roof in. But this was a super unique multi-purpose stadium because when you look back at all the different cookie cutters, all the multi-purpose, you know, stadiums back in the 80s, 70s, it's very rare to find a multi-purpose dome stadium, which is exactly what this was. And of course, something like this would never get built today. That it is completely obsolete. The roof is completely obsolete. I don't think any professional sports team would build a stadium with no natural, well, I guess outside of the NBA, right? Outside of the NBA, but, you know, like NFL, MLB, you're going to want some natural light to be let into it. The Metrodome, you know, when you talk about its lifespan, maybe not the longest life, 1982 to 2013, but it is the only venue on record to have hosted an MLB All-Star Game, a Super Bowl, an NCAA Final Four. It hosted 2 of those, and it did also host 2 World Series. So you're talking about multi-purpose, the Vikings and the Twins. They got a lot of use out of it. And we're going to take a look at the capacity and how the multi-purpose process works. You can see baseball versus football seems to be about a discrepancy of 7,000 total seats. Opening baseball at around 54K, football at 62. The football capacity actually rose to 64K for the final year in 2013, as opposed to the baseball kind of chopping off some of their capacity all the way. And then finally in 2009, it did have a capacity right around 45,000. And then there you can see basketball with Final Four sitting at 35K. But yes, the Metrodome, just taking a look at its multi-purpose configuration, I would say, I mean, it's tough, man. Anytime you have a multi-purpose stadium, the one thing I do like about it is kind of the apron that they brought up down from the upper deck, and you can see all those like enlarged baseball cards or whatever they are. I do think that looks decent. It is a lot better than putting up tarp, which is probably the most ugly thing you can do with a stadium, or putting up some type of cover or overhang. You know, that is a decent look. So I thought that was good creativity. You know, the seating is kind of a mess, I'll be honest. Like, you can see the walls of seats in right field, and then they kind of have it stacked on top of each other in center field. They're angled a certain way. You can kind of see, you know, during the football games where home plate was, and the seats in right field that they had to push back to configure it for baseball. I actually think the worst parts of the stadium, if you look down the first base line, I mean, it's janky. Like, there's no other way to say it. It's really bad. And then also the center field configuration is really bad as well. It is what it is. Another little fun fact, out in left field, they put up a plexiglass wall because I guess they thought it was too shallow. And they wanted to kind of, it's just so cheap, man. You can't put up a plexiglass wall for an MLB team. What are we doing here? That thing was used into the 2000s, I believe. It's just, but yes, the Metrodome, multi-purpose throughout all of the 90s into the late 2000s, 2010 is when the Twins made the move, and it became mainly a football-only facility for the last 3 years, and the naming rights actually transferred over with Mall of America. In 2009, Mall of America purchased the naming rights for the field, and it was called Mall of America Field at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome. That was for 3 years until it closed and then was demolished. And yes, you can see there is the roof that did collapse. That's kind of what it's been known for now. The tent design, they did repair it, and it kind of finished out its final seasons after the repair. And it did finish out its final seasons before it was officially demolished. At that point, the Vikings actually had to move to the Minnesota Golden Gophers stadium for a few years before their super stadium was ready, and they played there in the freezing cold. You know, with those months in Minneapolis, it gets really bad in December. That's why when you're talking about an NFL team in Minnesota, I mean, you need a dome or like a retractable roof. Actually, I was looking back at the planning of US Bank Stadium. There were some different renderings early in the process for a retractable roof, because with Minnesota, theoretically, it would be fine to keep the roof open in September if you have 2 or 3 home games in September. Also October, I feel like they could have gotten some decent use out of it. But you're going to at least need a retractable roof, and a retractable roof does cost more money than just a fixed dome, which is what they went with. I love the new US Bank Stadium, but you can see there's some really interesting photos. Anytime you see a fixed dome stadium get demolished, and like you can see the outside of it, it's just a weird situation. It's like seeing one of your parents naked, seeing one of these stadiums without a roof on it when you're so used to seeing it with the roof. But one of the other things about the Metrodome, it got its inspiration from the Pontiac Silverdome. And just when you look at for football, dude, this thing could not be more bland. It is 2 big bowls of seating. That is all it is. There is nothing special about it. And by the time it was 2010, 2011, it was right up there. St. Louis, their dome was terrible. The Oakland Coliseum, when the Raiders were playing there, was terrible. It was right towards the bottom of worst stadiums in the NFL. And it was just 2 walls of seating. It was bare bones. And that's why it didn't last long at all, only going from 1982 to 2013. But it does have the argument they did get a good shelf life out of it because it hosted both the Twins and the Vikings. It was multi-purpose, and it served a lot of different things when you're talking about hosting an MLB All-Star game, hosting 2 World Series, hosting 2 Final Fours, hosting a Super Bowl. This was a place that did do a lot in a short period of time, and it will be remembered as a very unique multi-purpose stadium because it was a dome. And it is very hard with multi-purpose stadiums to make them look decent for both, baseball and football. I think it looks decent for football. Again, the big issue is it's just very average. It's just 2 walls of seating. For baseball, there is issues with it. I mean, you can see a bunch of the pushed back seats, but that is what it is. And then look at this. They've brought the design back. This is the Minnesota Golden Gophers baseball stadium that they use. This is their home stadium early in the season because college baseball starts so early. They actually play their home games at US Bank Stadium, and they push the wall back. It looks a lot better with US Bank because you can't really see the seats. They cover them up with like a wall or like a purple padding. But you can see that's where they play due to the early season cold. They've brought the design back. You can't get rid of it. You can demolish the Metrodome, but you can't get rid of its legacy and its technology. Yes, those are the great things. But I just wanted to look back at the Metrodome. It was officially demolished in 2014, having served just over 30 years. The construction cost back in 1979 sitting at $55 million, which is around $220 million in today's money. So when you factor that in, $220 million for... So I mean, when you factor it all in, $220 million, getting 32 years out of it, hosting primary home, MLB and NFL, that is good usage. And I do think Minnesota... They were proactive, they realized it was obsolete and it had to go, and now they have 2 beautiful stadiums. Target Field, I would consider a top 10 stadium in the MLB. And then, of course, US Bank Stadium, which is absolutely beautiful. So that is the story of the Metrodome. Just wanted to talk about it. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.